Thank you all for joining us today. We know this is a difficult and uncertain time. The Chamber is trying to do what we can to provide information and resources to our member businesses. We are also grateful to our partner chambers who are each doing great work serving the business community as well. At this time, we were supposed to have Senator Cornyn's legislative assistant, Jacob Smith. However, we have the senator this afternoon, and it is my pleasure to introduce him to give us a DC update. Senator, throughout your career, you have been a steady leader through times of crisis, and certainly Texas has had its fair share. But perhaps never before have we experienced something so disruptive and concerning and unprecedented. We are so grateful you have always had your finger on the pulse of Texas employers and businesses and supported policies that promote economic growth and help us create more quality jobs for hardworking Texans. Thank you, sir, for carving time out of your day amidst all that is happening to speak directly with the Central Texas business community. With that, I'm going to turn things over to you. Thank you again, Senator.
Thanks, Dana. I appreciate the opportunity to join all of you. And what I thought I would do, with your permission, is just give you an update on what's happening in Washington, D.C. I've been in regular contact with the governor, as you can imagine, and talking to local leaders around the state and businesses. Everybody that I know is affected by this coronavirus one way or the other. And so we're all in this together, and I have every confidence that we'll come out of this just fine on the back end, but it's going to be a bumpy ride along the way. The first thing that the Congress did was pass an $8.3 billion appropriation bill, which provided, among other things, for reimbursement to the state and local jurisdictions for the expenses that they have had associated with this coronavirus issue. There is almost $1 billion available for the country, and for that purpose, and Texas immediately got $35 million for that reimbursement, but there's more available as the need increases. We started off also making sure that everything from meals for the elderly to school meals where students get free lunches, that just because of the fact the schools were closed or that seniors couldn't congregate, that didn't stop them from getting the nutrition that they needed. We also fast-tracked the money that was necessary for the healthcare system, and including coming up with the vaccine. Obviously, that's a longer-term prospect, but that was the first effort we undertook to show that we took this issue seriously. It was passed at $8.3 billion appropriation. Last night, or yesterday, the president signed the second bill that was passed by the House on Saturday morning, but ultimately made its way to the Senate on Monday. We passed that bill on Wednesday. I'm losing track of the days. And that bill was designed to help small businesses and their employees. Obviously, there are a lot of people that are shut down through no fault of their own. There are a lot of folks who who need to quarantine or to take care of a loved one, or including their children when they're not in school. And so we provided enhanced benefits for both sick leave and also paid family leave in order to supervise and to tend to a loved one. A lot of the resources there were designed to help businesses between 50 employees and 500 employees, but that total amount of benefit in that bill is in excess of $100 billion. I know it's staggering to think about the money that we're having to spend, but we realize this is an all hands on deck moment. The third bill that we're working on that we haven't seen yet, but I do expect to appear here shortly, will be the Stage 3 proposal. The administration, Secretary Mnuchin, has asked for three things in particular, several things, but in this Stage 3 proposal. One is the airlines industry have gotten hammered. I've been talking to the Texas-based carriers as well as national carriers like United, and they're burning through cash. They have no or few riders, and they're cutting back on their routes because they just simply don't have the demand for their services. And they're worried about their viability because they're burning through cash. After 9/11, there was arrangements made to help the airline industry, and we no doubt will do that again at some level. But they're not the only ones. I was talking to a hospital system. The CEO runs a lot of hospitals in Texas. He said they've got cash, but they don't have unlimited cash. And if all they see are Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement patients and elective surgery is postponed in order to maintain capacity at our our hospitals, then they're not going to be able to pay their bills and keep their doors open for coronavirus patients or anybody else. And so we're looking at other ways to support access to credit and liquidity for other severely distressed sectors of the economy. Obviously, the hospitality industry has been hammered too, just as another example. And then there's another stabilization fund to guarantee money market mutual funds. There's a proposal for getting money to people who are not earning any income because through no fault of their own, they are not getting a paycheck. And I do believe that there's a desire not only to try to do this through unemployment compensation, but as you probably know, the unemployment compensation programs in Texas and elsewhere are getting hammered just by the volume, and they may not be able to handle the capacity. So we're looking at things like cash payments through the IRS that could make its way directly to people who are earning no income. My hope is we can means test that rather than just send money to everybody. We don't need to do that to people who don't need the money. In other words, people who are still employed and earning a paycheck. But that's that part of it. And the final thing, which you may be interested in, is a proposal for $300 billion for the creation of a small business interruption loan program. And this would provide a U.S. government guarantee on any qualifying small business interruption loan. And there would be certain criteria, as you would imagine, for that process. But the goal is to make sure that not only the big businesses can maintain liquidity and keep alive for the duration of this crisis, but also that small businesses obviously are the main employers in our state and nation. So we're going to try to do everything we can to help them keep their doors open and keep serving their customers. So let me just stop there, and I don't want to dominate the whole conversation, but I did want to give you an update, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Senator, I think we have one question that's come in that says, can you please let us know if the recently approved bill signed by the president applies for small businesses with less than 50 employees? If not, is there anything coming down the pipeline to help these smaller businesses and their employees?
Yeah, Dana, I think the bill the president just signed applies to 50 and above, up to 500, and that is something we need to continue to try to do. The problem is, it's hard. Well, we're trying to figure a way to target the money. For example, you know, if you own a restaurant, like one gentleman contacted me, and you can't serve any meals in your restaurant, and you can only do takeout and delivery. Obviously, he's going to have to furlough a number of his employees, but he doesn't have the money coming in the door to pay his overhead and his bills, and so he may just cease to exist. We're trying to figure ways to get money available to both people who are not working, but also this business interruption approach, which is going to be part of this third bill. But I will take your point, or that individual's point. Well, actually, this one would apply to 500 employees or less. So there isn't any bottom limitation on, as in the second bill, which was 50 to 500. This would apply to all employers with 500 or less employees.
Okay. Let's see. What is the timeline for the third bill coming down the line?
We are
Signed.
we are not going to recess. We're going to be working here through the weekend until we get that third bill done. I will tell you that the way this is going, I'm thinking that we're going to be here for a while, and we're going to continue to have to deal with various needs in succession. So third bill, I would predict maybe early next week. As you can imagine, given the amount of money we're talking about and given the complexity of this, we have both a necessity to move quickly, but we need to make sure we're not just we're not making unnecessary mistakes in the process. So we'll probably do this the first part of next week, having worked through the weekend on it, and then we'll take up another appropriation bill that the administration has sent us, and then try to reevaluate as we go along for other unmet needs.
Is there anything?
Let me just add, I can tell you that in talking to the governor, as I have been doing, and our healthcare providers, we recognize the need for testing is there, and we're in the process, the federal government is in the process of ramping that up dramatically. But it's important to note that the Center for Disease Control does not recommend testing people who are not symptomatic. And so we know that some people are more vulnerable, like elderly folks with underlying illnesses. And if we are going to test people who are not yet symptomatic, my hope is that we would try to target the most vulnerable. For most of us, if you're otherwise healthy and you get this virus, you're going to be okay, and actually you're at low risk of getting the virus as long as you exercise good personal hygiene and social distancing, a phrase that we've all now become acquainted with.
One other question relates to independent contractors. Is there anything being considered to help them, especially, you know, South by Southwest? A lot of the people that supported that event, they're now out of work and looking, you know, until events and big concerts and things can come back online. What's being done to help that sector?
Well, this is a subject that one of our Tennessee senators, who obviously they have a similar interest in providing for people who provide the means by which people perform concerts and other public activities. So yes, this would apply to contractors as well, and not just to the employers. I just want to, and my staff just handed me a note and reminded me that the bill we passed gives the labor secretary also the regulatory authority to exempt small businesses with less than 50 employees from the sick and family leave requirements. So we had to try to figure out, you know, how do we get help to people, but we don't also want to make the requirements on small businesses so burdensome that ends up being a drag on them as well.
Is there any way that small business owners can use the loans to pay for personal expenses? Many of our small businesses live off of the profits of their business. Is that something that's being considered?
Yeah, I don't think, we haven't really discussed the way that people do business, whether they're C corporations or pass-throughs or partnerships or sole proprietorships. I understand those different business organizations handle their cash differently. So my assumption is that it would apply to any way you happen to be doing business, whether you're a sole proprietor, partnership, pass-through, or a C corporation.
Well, thank you, Senator Cornyn. I know that you're very busy right now, and we really appreciate you taking time this afternoon. I know Jacob Smith is on the line to listen to the rest of the call and to get feedback to continue to get it to you to help you craft this legislation in DC. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for letting me join you, and any other questions, please direct those to Jacob or any of my staff there in Austin, okay?
Great, thank you. And thank you to all of Senator Cornyn's staff who are also working around the clock in this unprecedented time.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for the rest of the panel, Reed Clay. Reed is the founder and CEO of Crestline Solutions. Prior to this, Reed served as Governor Abbott's Chief Operating Officer. Reed was charged with handling the recovery in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. Of Reed, Governor Abbott said, "Reed is an expert problem solver who tackled some of the biggest issues facing the state of Texas, none bigger than Hurricane Harvey, when he stepped forward to lead the efforts in his office to ensure a swift and effective recovery process." So with that, I'm going to let Reed take it away and introduce our panelists.
Well, thank you, Dana. First, I wanted to give a quick update on some news that came out of Austin earlier today. The governor held a press conference at the Capitol where he announced an executive order, which is essentially applying statewide the CDC guidelines that came out of DC earlier this week. The quick bullet points are no gatherings more than 10 folks. And so essentially that means there's no dining in or drinking in restaurants or bars. Schools are temporarily closed, and there will be no visitation to nursing homes or long-term facilities. Secondarily speaking, the first public health disaster declaration since 1901 was issued today, just sort of underscoring the gravity of the situation that we're facing. It's important to know that the executive order today is not a shelter-in-place order, so it is different than what some states have done. All critical infrastructure remains open. The government is open. Domestic travel is open. Offices are open, but only essential personnel is sort of recommended, and teleworking is encouraged. The last thing is they did give an update on kind of where we stand in terms of the number of cases. Just since last week, when the emergency declaration was given or was made by the governor, there was 39 cases in the state. That's jumped to over 140. And obviously in that time, we've seen 3 confirmed deaths from the virus. The last thing that I think is important to relay to this group that the governor mentioned is echoing the way that Texas responded after Harvey. He really challenged us to comply with these measures, as burdensome as they are, as frustrating as they are. He and Dr. Hellerstedt, the head of DSHS, or the State Health Services Commission, were very clear that the quickest way to get out of this downward spiral that we're in, the quickest way to stem the number of cases that we're seeing and to lessen the burden on the healthcare system is to abide by these orders. The executive order is good through April 3rd. I think the hope is that compliance with these provisions is going to really stem and bend the curve, so to speak. But he did leave open the possibility that these measures would be extended. With that, I'd like to jump to our panelists. First, I want to introduce Suzannah Jones, who's the Deputy Chief at the Texas Department of Emergency Management, which handles the state's response and recovery apparatus for all disasters, including medical ones like this one. She has covered, unfortunately, numerous federally declared disasters in our state in her time with TDEM, so we're really lucky to have her with us today. Suzannah, if I could, let me ask you an initial question, which is, in times like this, communication is very critical. How can the Texans on the phone here properly communicate their needs to state officials, and what steps should they take to set themselves and the state up for success during this difficult time?
Thanks, Reed. I think it's important to know that there is a broad network of emergency management across the state of Texas. In the current situation with COVID-19, any health-related questions or issues should be directed to the local health department. For other disaster or general emergency management related questions, the first stop should be your local emergency management office. Each of the 254 counties in Texas has one, and many cities and jurisdictions do as well. This group of people will be the best informed about issues in your local areas when it comes to disasters and emergencies and the situation with COVID-19. This local emergency management network widens to the state level, which is where I work for the Texas Division of Emergency Management, and over 30 different state agencies and different organizations that work together to support emergency management across the state. TDEM, as we call the Texas Division of Emergency Management, has employees that reside in each region of the state. Our district coordinators, or we call them DCs, work closely with local jurisdictions and local emergency management and act as a liaison at the state level. These district coordinators live and work in those areas and are a great resource. You can locate the specific district coordinator for your area on our website. That link is very simple. It's tdem.texas.gov. And if you look in the website, there's a tab for regions, and you can go to a map that will identify exactly who that person is. So absolutely a huge emergency management network for instance you have in the state. First stop is local emergency management. They can handle things best related to your areas, and then certainly our statewide staff that can help as well.
Thanks, Suzannah. The next question I have for you is, after Hurricane Harvey, we saw a lot of regulations and rules that were waived through the governor's emergency powers. We've seen some of that already thus far with the response to coronavirus. We've seen some rules about telemedicine and making sure we've got temporary licensure for out-of-state healthcare workers. And then we've seen some directly related to ensuring that businesses are staying open. Trucking restrictions were eased to make sure that we're restocking grocery stores, et cetera. And then we saw just yesterday a restrictions lifted off of alcohol delivery with any food order. What is the process? What can you tell the business owners on the phone here? What's the process on the state side for these waivers? And if they have ideas or suggestions on regulatory restrictions that could be eased that would help them through this burdensome time, what process should they undertake to communicate with the state?
Sure. As you say, Reed, one of the main reasons the governor will make a disaster declaration is because it gives him the ability to waive any law or regulation or policy for that matter that creates a barrier to an immediate response and a quick recovery. As you mentioned, there are a lot of waivers that the governor has in place now. During Hurricane Harvey, there were lists and lists of them that were key to starting our recovery very quickly from that disaster, and will be key in dealing with and recovering from this disaster. As you all know, Governor Abbott has always reacted quickly in these situations, and obviously is again with COVID-19. The need for some of these waivers that Reed mentioned is overt. I mean, they're easy. Yes, I can see that. Others may not be so obvious. So as you're going through your, dealing with COVID-19 and running your businesses, if you run into any issues or see a state law or a rule or a policy that needs to be reviewed because it's providing a roadblock for response or recovery or anything in dealing with COVID-19 as you should, then stand up and speak out. And again, I will revert back to my first answer to Reed's question, was that reach out to your local emergency manager, let them know about it. You can contact your TDEM district coordinator, which I referred you can find on tdem.texas.gov. But like I said, the biggest step is saying, hey, what can we do about this? This is in my way. We need to change it. Reach out to your local emergency manager, reach out to your TDEM district coordinator, go to our website and get that contact information, because we can then act as we do at the state level, and act as a liaison to the governor's office and alert them to something that we may or they may not have seen that can help you respond to this event, deal with your situation, and recover faster. So like I said, stand up and speak up as soon as you can with the local emergency management community or with our TDEM state district coordinators.
Thank you, Suzannah. One more question for you. Obviously, a big concern to business owners around the state with this interruption of business is obviously the lack of revenue and cash flow during this time. What steps has the state taken to specifically address the looming losses that these businesses may experience due to the disaster?
Sure. So I can say, we know at the federal level, and President Trump had declared or made the Small Business Administration Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program open and available to states and their jurisdictions. I won't cross over into the SBA piece too much. I know we have subject matter experts on the phone for that, but I will say that early last week, the governor was adamant about having this program in place as soon as possible to provide a source of assistance to small businesses. We work with the SBA a lot during disasters. Their disaster loan programs have provided individuals and small businesses in Texas with millions, probably billions in loans over the last many years. To become eligible for this program, a state is required to show 5 small businesses with substantial economic impact. Once this is established, the governor can make a request, which did happen this week. Governor Abbott made a request for the Small Business Administration loan program, and we are waiting and believe we will have a response pretty quickly on that. We do not have it yet. In order to get those 5 small businesses, we worked, when the governor made the call, a ton of people who I'm very grateful for worked together at the state level, the local level, chambers of commerce, businesses, to provide information so we could collect the data we needed for the governor to make that request to the SBA. And also, a huge thanks to SBA, because usually to become eligible for these loans, each county must show at least one business that would have substantial economic impact from the COVID-19 or whatever disaster we're talking about. But SBA was able to change policy. So instead of having to go out and get businesses who are, hugely involved in the impacts of COVID-19 right now, we were able to, or the governor was able to request that this SBA loan program be eligible statewide. So it saved us a lot of legwork. So we are really grateful for our strong federal relationships with organizations like the SBA that can happen. So again, we don't have word on the declaration yet. We're grateful that the governor and all these people work together proactive to try and get this set up. The SBA will have a lot more information about that, but you can always find updates on the status of the declaration on our website. Again, that's tdem.texas.gov. And while the actual loan application process goes directly between the business and the SBA, again, you can always come to TDEM, your district coordinator, or our website to get more information.
Well, thank you, Suzannah, and please pass along all of our thanks for all the hard work that you and the rest of TDEM are doing for the state of Texas. These are tough times, and we're lucky to have folks like yourself, handling this tough situation. So we appreciate all the hard work you're doing. Next, I want to introduce Herb Austin, who is the District Director in the Dallas-Fort Worth Office of the Small Business Administration, and Elsie Collins, his Deputy Director, to talk a little bit about the program that Suzannah was just talking about, which is the Small Business Administration's Disaster Loan Program. Herb and Elsie, thank you so much for being here. I think the most pressing question, most obvious question, going back to Suzannah's comments is there any insight into when we might see the declaration from the federal government that would open up this program to businesses in Texas?
This is Elsie Collins. At this point, we expect it pretty soon. Our administrator had a conference call earlier today with a lot of stakeholders, and she believes that by the end of the week, we'll have, most of the states declared, but we know that it is in the works, and so we're hopeful that we'll get it pretty soon. I anticipate we'll definitely probably have it this week. There are several states, of course, that's already been declared, and you can find that on our website. The only counties so far that have actually been declared in Texas are those that are contiguous to another state, to a state that has been declared. For example, like New Mexico. Some of those counties that are near New Mexico that are on the Texas side, you'll see those on our website that they were approved or declared as a contiguous county to New Mexico. But what the governor's request has been received, and he requested all counties, and so we are hopeful, pretty confident that that's going to come pretty quickly. And once that declaration, we get word of that, it'll be posted on the SBA website, sba.gov/disaster, and then we will continue to provide that information to our stakeholders and do our constant contacts and get that information out as quickly as we possibly can. Once that declaration is open, then that is when the small business owners can immediately begin to make application. And so anyone that has been calling our office and just popping in, we have been providing them with a fact sheet that basically talks about the program, giving them a little bit of really what is going to be required for their application in terms of their eligibility, and that's on our website. So we are encouraging them to just get prepared to find, have copies of their profit and loss statement, schedule of liabilities, and things like that. So when they file their application and is accepted and passed to a loan officer, they'll have all the information in that file to process that application as quickly as possible. The interest rates, of course, on the loan, on the small business, on the economic injury disaster loan is 3.75%. And the loan in itself is a working capital loan to help with those expenses and obligations that have to be paid during the time that the business is impacted. Once the loan office, or once the business owner completes their application, then they'll be assigned to work with the loan officer, and they will work with them to determine how they were injured. Our office of disaster assistance, and with our administrator, is looking at, have been looking to streamline the process, cut red tape, and look at expedited ways to move those, to process the files as quickly as possible. And currently, as far as the district offices are concerned, any calls that we're receiving from applicants, we're trying to call them back, talk to them, forward them a copy of the fact sheet. We're directing them to our website where they can actually see when those declarations are posted and when they become eligible, and we'll do our follow-up calls and emails to keep everybody informed. So we're trying to continue to work with all the stakeholders to make sure that they stay informed. We're working with our SBDCs to provide them with some information so that when applicants come to them during the process, they'll be able to provide them with some assistance.
Okay, great. Thank you for that overview. Quick question, once the loan program is turned on and folks apply, how quickly will credit decisions be made, and how quickly will money be available to successful applicants?
Good question. Okay, first of all, this is unprecedented in terms of the numbers that we're going to see when you've got all of the states and so many businesses impacted. Under normal circumstances, the disaster team, they actually have goals to where they're trying to process the loans as quickly as possible. And they're going to be processed first in, first out, and there are guidelines. Normally on a business loan, they try to get a decision within 18 days to 21 days, but they normally average less than that. So they try to get it as quick as possible. Some are going to be, all the information is there. It's quick to make a decision. It'll probably be a little bit faster. I can't really speak to the closing side of it in terms of how long it's going to take, but they have improved their process over the years, so it speeds it up. And I know that they are working on an expedited process, so they're not necessarily requiring all of the analysis maybe that they have had to require in the past, because we know that people have been impacted. So as soon as we get any information in terms of how quick that is going, then we will definitely let people know, but they do process them in the order that they receive. That doesn't mean that just because Texas hasn't been declared and California and some of the others are, that they're going to process all of those states and then get on Texas. It doesn't really work that way. They will have they're hiring and staffing up and training new staff so they can meet the demand. So they will have teams that are going to work on Texas and work on the different states. So it doesn't seem like, because there are so many applications way ahead of Texas right now, that Texas would not get those files or the loans as quick as possible. But they're going to look at what that injury period is, kind of work with them, and they may do some automatic injury periods right off the bat. Let's say that they were going to, let's say it's going to take 4 months really for them to get some type of back to normal for some business. Then they may look at a 4-month automatic injury period. And that, by defining that in itself, it makes it so much easier to process it. But some of the files, once they fill out the application online and they provide the information that they have, the loan officer can process it relatively quick. And they're not going to ask for any unnecessary information. It's about, you know, just looking at the overall credit, the ability to repay the loan, and then making a decision fairly quickly. And we'll continue to update that. But the minute that I get any idea in terms of really what that speed is, and we'll continue to let everybody know what they're averaging. But so I really can't get a definitive answer, but they do kind of change the game when we have large numbers like this, and they will try to speed up the process.
Okay, and what other resources are available for small businesses other than this SBA loan program?
Now, right now, as far as, I know that there is not a grant program through the SBA, but as far as SBA is concerned, our role, the only thing that we have is the loan program. But I know that they are, you know, our other federal partners are working to see what they can actually do, just like I think there was an earlier call in terms about the Department of Labor and what they're actually doing with the unemployment, and then the reimbursement, I believe, for the businesses that have had to lay off staff or put them on sick leave, and some reimbursement. So I know there's a lot of work that's going on there. What we'll do is we'll continue to work with the community to see what other programs are out there that they are offering. We'll work with our resource partners too, just to kind of see what other non-SBA programs and services are out there, and then we'll make sure that we get that out to everybody. But from our perspective, the only thing that we actually have is the low interest loan. But normally what you'll see sometimes is when you have disasters of size, that you'll have different other nonprofit organizations and others that will come together and offer some type of assistance for those individuals that may not meet the SBA requirement. So we will continue to see what is out in the community to see who can help the businesses that may not necessarily be helped by an SBA loan. And then of course, you know, everything that the senator was saying in terms of what Congress and our president is doing, you know, we'll continue to stay abreast of that and make sure we get that out to everybody as well.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to ask a few questions that are coming from the attendees real quick. And I think the first one from Virgil is, are there going to be field offices open to assist with the application in the same way that we had during Hurricane Harvey?
Under normal circumstances, they do. But on this one right here, I know that there has been discussion about it being primarily virtual. But, you know, that, of course, will change. And the reason virtual, of course, is from a resource standpoint, and then also the gathering of the limitations in terms of staff gathering. But we will, you know, as things develop, we will make sure that if there is some workshops are going to be set up, then we will definitely post that on our website. And if we will continue to listen to the community, if there are questions and we need to do workshops, then we'll do that once, you know, the ban is listed with regard to the number of people that can assimilate. And we'll do any webinars. If we have to help walk people through the applications and ask any questions, we will do that. I know even in the district office here, we've had a phone issue. So we've had a couple of people that have popped in, and we just kind of explain the process, and that will help. And we'll continue to do that as well. So, but for now, we do not have any designated workshops, but if that changes, we'll let everybody know. But right now, it may be all virtual. Okay.
And where, Bill has a question, where online could we find a list of documents necessary for businesses to apply for these SBA loans?
Yes, if you, it's on the SBA, www.sba.gov/disaster. And when you click on programs, it'll show you everything that is required for the application, like the SBA Form 5, which is in the portal, the tax form that you'll sign, the 4506, copy of your tax return if you have it, a personal financial statement, and that financial statement is important because that's how they're going to help determine your expenses and what you've actually lost. But it is actually on our website, and where it's listed with the application. Here are the things that you're going to need to submit your application. And I can also, it's posted on our website, but if I will send it to the presenter of this call, and we can make sure that if we have email addresses, we'll get that out to everybody as well, or to different stakeholders here on the call.
Okay. And a question from Lynn, is there any precedent for these SBA loans to have the interest rate lower, like 0% instead of the 3.75% that you quoted earlier?
No, I am not aware of that, and I thought I heard someone. I don't know if there's some statute or something around that, but I know that I haven't seen it done. That's not to say that it can't, that it won't be done. I just really can't speak to that. What we will find that when you have disasters this size, just like with Hurricane Harvey, you have changes in the program. Things change. They start out one way, and but I've never seen it drop towards 0.
And will those changes, I assume they would be posted to your website so that any applicant who's successful in getting a loan could follow those changes through your website? Yes,
and also on the website, there's a step-by-step process that it basically says, hey, step 1, you do this, step 2, you do this, here's what's to be expected. Once you make your application, you'll be able to, once your application is accepted, then it will be eventually assigned to a loan officer. That loan officer will contact them, and they also will have the ability, they should have the ability once they're in that portal as time progresses, where they can check the status of their loan as well.
Okay, and then one last question before we move on to our next panelist. And that question is, are nonprofits eligible for this loan program, or is it only for-profit businesses?
Nonprofits are eligible, but there are some nonprofits that are ineligible. Religious organizations and churches are ineligible for the economic injury disaster loan.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. We appreciate you answering all these questions. And obviously, I think I speak for all of us that we look forward to hearing very soon that the loan program has been turned on, so to speak, for this state. But again, we really appreciate your work as well, and appreciate your time coming on here to answer these questions. Next, I'd like to introduce Martin Ritchey, who, yes, you're welcome. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Martin Ritchey, who's the Director of Homeland Security for the Capital Area Council of Governments. Martin, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Reed. I really appreciate being invited to speak to your group. And I'm going to be covering the Stafford Act, which is pretty much the guiding law that helps bring an orderly and systematic way of federal funds and assistance from the state to come out to local governments and to aid citizens. This act was passed some 32 years ago. The state of Texas is it is the state that has received more federally declared disasters than any other state. We average about 35 federal disasters a year under the Stafford Act nationwide, and at times it feels like every one of those is in the state of Texas with our floods and hurricanes and tornadoes. This particular incident has already been given a disaster designation of EM 3458. That's going to be something that tracks from this point forward on all of the submissions of paperwork and documents involving this particular disaster. The president has the sole authority to declare a state of disaster, state of emergency under the Stafford Act, and it brings about this whole process. It's a 192-page document to bring out the allocations of funding that may be provided from the Congress for the purposes of recovery. I'm just going to touch upon a couple of things that I think are really important, as we don't know how this will be funded, and we don't know precisely how it's going to impact businesses. But certainly the Stafford Act provides a lot of funding to your local governments for their response to the emergency. The main thing for the people on the phone is to remember that any of the federal funds will never cover something that's a duplication of benefits. So if you're receiving business interruption insurance or some other form of benefit to tide you over through the disaster, the federal government's not going to provide something on top of that. Also, even though you're going through a very difficult time right now, it's important to have really good documentation. The federal government is really big on very precise information, and under the Stafford Act, every type of activity that you might do to secure your property, to mitigate the disaster, meaning you've cut back hours or something like that. If you document all of those things, that's going to be very good. Just like we do for a hurricane or a natural disaster, we track hours, we track equipment that's used, and each one of those documents has to tie people to equipment. It has to tie to a practical event. So just that would be my big comment to make for the folks on the phone, is to document all of your activities so that when you go to look for recovery, if there's going to be funding on the business side, then of course that will help you out through the process. The Stafford Act has been providing the state of Texas a great deal of funds to recover from natural disasters. This particular emergency is unprecedented. You've heard that said a couple of times. And so we're going to have to wait to find out precisely what activities the federal government will fund. We've heard some things from the president already. Those sound like they're going to be coming directly out of other agencies other than FEMA, which the Stafford Act is the agency that carries it out. So if they do bring some funds towards FEMA for this activity, you can be sure that it's going to follow that playbook.
Okay, so thank you, Martin, for that overview. Obviously, this is a very fluid situation, and just as we saw in Harvey, as federal legislation starts to come through, things will change. But what resources are out there for small businesses and individuals in terms of understanding all the different resources that may be available to them and how it all fits together?
Well, I think the folks from the SBA probably have the most from a federal level. In the regional areas, certainly the Capital Area Council of Governments, we work with our local government partners to foster a strong business environment. Our team that works on our regional economic development have regular meetings, so you might want to reach out to members of that team from around the region to see what kinds of activities they might be working on in the future. To get more information about CAPCOG, you'd go to capcog.org, CAPCOG. You can find out more information about all of our programs on that website.
Okay, thank you, Martin. I wanted to double back to Suzannah. If you're still on the line, could you give the website address again where folks on the phone could find their local district coordinator?
Absolutely, Reed. That is tdem.texas.gov. There are tabs on that main page, and it says regions, and you just go in. It's pretty self-explanatory, and you can see who your local district coordinator contact is. Again, it's tdem.texas.gov.
Okay, and Elsie, are you still on the phone?
Yes.
I had another question come in that I think is a good one for folks to hear, since Harvey was so recent, and Texas is no stranger to federally declared disasters where this loan program has been previously available. If current businesses have an SBA loan in good standing, are they still eligible for this form of emergency loan?
Yes. Yes. Just because you had one in a previous loan does not mean that you can't have another one. Different disaster. So they would be eligible as long as they our current and paid as agreed and kept whatever stipulations that were required. For example, if they were required to have flood insurance and they didn't have the flood insurance or let it go, that would be an issue. But as far as an economic injury disaster loan, they would be eligible.
Okay, and another question for you is what sort of, will assets like a retirement account, will they exclude the ability to borrow?
No, they will not exclude their ability to borrow and be approved. There is a credit elsewhere test that is done, and there are certain things that are excluded or out of that. And so when the loan officer processes it, they will take a look at that. But it doesn't automatically mean that just because you have X amount in your retirement fund that you're going to be required to tap into that before you apply. It doesn't work that way, no.
Okay, and then another question from Mark regarding SBA loans. Is the SBA going to be looking at your run rate liabilities based on normal operations, or are they looking at the lowest number possible? For instance, after employees are laid off and costs are reduced to a bare minimum?
Well, actually, when they're determining the injury, they're looking at what you were like prior to the disaster occurring. So it's not trying to get you the lowest amount of money, it's trying to get you back to where you were. So if you had X amount, if you require X amount of expenses to run your business, that's what they're going to be looking at. Now, for some businesses, they may want to maintain staff and continue to include their salary because they don't want to lose them, you know. So when they're looking at the analysis, they're going to include that salary is still there. So they're going to look at what it was prior to the disaster and to try to put you back in that position that you were before.
Okay, very good. And Martin, are you still on?
I sure am.
Martin, I had a good question from Christy. In past disasters such as Harvey, we've seen the CDBG program roll out through appropriations by Congress. And those, you know, often include eligible economic development activities. What, in your experience, what's your sort of estimation on whether CDBG-DR is something that might be allocated for this disaster based upon your history with previous ones?
Well, she's very right that there are CDBG dollars that come out after an event. Typically, they're about a year out from the initial activity. And, you know, my guess for this is unsure, because we're looking at appropriations that are now, you know, into the trillions of dollars that are expected at this point. So when we do see that, the CDBG dollars usually are equivalent to what has been, you know, paid out in the disaster as well. So like for Hurricane Harvey, you know, we see that we had two tranches of CDBG dollars, one for, you know, that covered economics and recovery for $4.2 billion, and then another $4.2 billion now for mitigation activities. So, you know, I would hope they would provide some additional funding downstream to provide mechanisms for our health care institutions to be prepared for the next pandemic, and to help our businesses be more resilient to these kinds of activities. But we won't know until the legislature puts those out and puts it together.
Martin, just to follow up on that question, since CDBG is a HUD program and it's traditionally been implemented by the General Land Office at the state level, is that the two agencies, and are their websites the place to go for people to follow any appropriations that may come to the CDBG-DR program? It's
principally going to be managed through the General Land Office. The Department of Agriculture also picks up some of the funding as well, so you probably would want to keep an eye on that website as well.
Okay, thank you. And then Elsie, another question for you from Kyle. Do these is the SBA loan program going to be available for single member businesses like a freelance contractor and those smallest of the small businesses?
Yes.
Okay. Another question for you, Elsie, from Michael Shapiro. Regarding the requirement to fill out a personal financial statement that's required, is the owner to complete the form, or is it completed for the entire company?
The owner completes the form, but they're going to be looking at your tax returns as well. So when they sign the 4506, we can get a copy of those. But there's a personal financial statement for the individual, and that's the form 413, I believe.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we're coming up on 4 o'clock, and so I want to, Dana, I want to hand it back to you. But first, let me just thank all our panelists for being here today. Really appreciate your participation and answering the many questions that we've gotten. You know, obviously, this is a tough time for businesses, so we appreciate your willingness to be here and answer the questions. Dana, thanks for having me, and I turn it back over to you.
Yes, I just want to reiterate, thanks so much to everyone who joined us today, and I want you all to know that we are cataloging these questions, and we're going to try to get some more answers for you and use these to base our future webinars on. We have one coming up tomorrow morning with McKinsey to talk about the supply chain, and then next week look for emails for the ongoing webinars we'll do next week. We hope to have another one on the bill once the big bill in DC is passed and signed into law. We're going to hopefully have Congressman Michael McCall come on and walk us through the high-level details of that. Please know that everyone here at the Chamber is at your disposal, and we are here to answer and help you with any questions or things you may need. And that I say that for the Austin Chamber, as well as the Young Chamber, the LGBT Chamber, the Asian Chamber, the Black Chamber, and the Hispanic Chamber. Please reach out to any of us with any questions you may have. And I want to thank them for being our partners, not only today, but always in the good times and the bad. So with that, be safe and stay healthy and stay inside. And hope to see you all soon. Thank you so much.